and they don't want to pay for professional assistance or help in that. That may be an example where that could qualify for that. And that's a little bit of a slippery slope. Maybe things were done improperly. And here's the harsh truth. Not every professional that you trust to help you buy a home is equipped to help you navigate your biggest financial investment. The dream of owning a home oftentimes turns into a nightmare because no one tells those home buyers those unsuspecting pitfalls that are waiting to catch them. Contracts, hidden clauses, costly surprises. Most buyers don't even know what they're signing up for when they choose to buy a home. Over 90% of people that purchase a home use a real estate professional to help them do this, but so few of them actually understand the critical role that they play in that transaction to help them navigate it. Now, I want to welcome you to day one. If you are just checking out this video is part of a series all about buying a home. And we're going to cover a ton of critical things that you need to know about buying a home. And today's session is going to be a 10,000 foot view on the entire process looking into it. Now, if you didn't catch our original video, which may have brought you to this video, that was our full buyer's mastery session. This is where the exact same presentation that we spend when we bring on home buyers, helping to educate them about what's going on in the market and how to buy a home successfully. Well, that is available, and we will make that available in the description below this video. But you are on day one. We are breaking this down into further parts, and this is going to be a multi-day series. So without further ado, let's jump into this and make sure that you know everything you need to know to be successful and not be one of those people who completely regrets their investment and purchase of a home. So getting into it, there's so many things that can go wrong when you buy a home. And obviously, your goal is to avoid those as much as possible. And one of the biggest problems that I see as a real estate professional is people get into, the notion of buying a home and they just dive in feet first. They don't do any homework, they don't do any preparation. And then what happens is all these things get discovered throughout the process that they didn't know they could have been prepared for. And it ends up costing them time, it ends up costing them money, it ends up costing them disappointment. And you don't want that. You're an educated person and you want to make sure you do it absolutely the best way possible. So, one of the things that you do need to understand before you get into the entire process is just about the things that could go wrong, because you want to arm yourself with the fortitude. I don't know, is that the right word? But you want to arm yourself so you can avoid these things. When you buy a home, you could end up buying a home that has upgrades done, upgrades that didn't have permits done. Maybe things were done improperly. And oftentimes when we sell homes, there's many times that things are done inside the home by a homeowner. However, they're not done properly. The homeowner is a dentist by day, but is doing electrical work in their home by night. That's scary, scary stuff. When you buy a home, you don't want to overpay for it. There's so many things. And we live in a world where you've got such good information available online. The days of a realtor just really being responsible for a buyer and assisting them in their home search, those days are gone. You have the access to almost the identical information that a real estate professional would in the marketplace, but you don't want to overpay for a home. That's going to be something that can be really difficult, especially living in Metro Vancouver or British Columbia, where we see property swings all the time, where the prices are kind of all over the place. Depending on what happens in the future, if you overpay for a home, that can prevent you from ever being able to get out of it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. You don't want to overpay for services of people helping you investigate the home to make sure you're making a right decision. And you don't want to make bad decisions. You don't want to hire the wrong person. You don't want to pick the wrong home, and you don't want to not do your diligence. Those can all obviously lead to really big problems that you don't want to encounter. So the solution to a big piece of this, if you've never been familiar with buying a home in the past, is getting a real estate professional to help you navigate the purchase of likely what is one of your biggest financial investments you're ever going to make in your entire life. It seems to make sense that you would want to have somebody that's going to help you navigate that and get through that process so you can navigate it properly. So many people I don't feel that they always understand what a real estate professional does. And the regulator that oversees the realtors in British Columbia, they're doing a lot better job helping us help the public understand exactly what it is we do. But because you're watching this video, I want you to understand really exactly what a realtor does do. There's so many facets to the ways that they help people more than just the search, as I mentioned. So let me give you a few examples here. When you work with a real estate professional in BC, there's some really basic things that you should expect of them. You should expect confidentiality of your information. If you're buying a home because you have to, or you're relocating into an area, or you're being kicked out of your current rental and you need to find a place to live, those are things that you never want anybody knowing. And a real estate professional is going to maintain that confidentiality. They actually have what's called a fiduciary duty to you, which is by law very similar to what a lawyer would have to. They are or you are their principal rather, and they are there to protect your best interests, your personal position, and maintain your confidentiality. They're also there to avoid conflict. So they want to make sure that they have an unbiased opinion and they're able to provide unbiased information to you so you can make decisions without knowing or having bias hanging over your head. One of the other things they owe you is loyalty, so it's really important to know who works for who in a real estate transaction. Earlier I said you would never go to court and choose to use the same lawyer that was suing you, from the other party that's suing you. You would never do that, so you need to really understand who is working for you, and that's really, really important. Now, a realtor is also going to add, this is one of my favorite things about what real estate professionals do, is they act as a third party negotiator. If you've ever negotiated for yourself on anything, it is very emotional. And it's funny, I've been selling real estate since 2007, and I don't love negotiating for myself, but I love negotiating for my clients because I'm not emotionally invested in it. And one of the fun things about that is too, is depending on the experience of the real estate professional that you hire, negotiation's a pretty big deal. And when you do get emotionally clouded with those, what's happening, somebody sends you an offer or a counter offer and your mind's going wild because it's lower than what you thought it was going to be, that sort of stuff. Well, you're going to be dealing with emotion, whereas a real estate professional might have the opportunity to say to you, look, I've been in this situation many times. I've seen many buyers like you in this situation before, and this is what they did to be successful, or these are tricks that I've used to help people produce the result that they're looking for, and perhaps you'll think about using this as well. So oftentimes they can help you get a much better price on a home than you would traditionally get by yourself. And when we're talking about price as well, we need to also be considerate about real-time market values. Oftentimes when you're buying something, let's say you were buying something off Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, and you thought you got a reasonably good deal, but you weren't educated completely on what the real going rate for that particular product was in the marketplace. An example, I'm selling a MacBook right now. Someone's eventually going to buy it, but how do they know that they got the best price for that MacBook, or what is the really going rate of MacBooks that are used from particular time? And the same goes with houses. So how do you know that you're getting a good deal? If you saw a $900,000 townhome and the negotiated price off it became $880,000, and you thought, my gosh, I am so good at negotiating, I got $20,000 off the price of this place. Well, what if the real going rate, or what that place was really worth, was 860,000, 850,000, right? So it's really important that you get that advice about real-time market values. And your time is important. So when you're going out and looking at real estate, oftentimes there's so many things that people want in a home, but there's also many times that there's things that they don't want in a home. And a real estate professional can help you filter those homes so you're making the best use of your time. Maybe you're not buying in the community in which you're currently living or working, so it's a little bit of a commute. I mean, I live in Surrey, BC, so getting anywhere takes time. So if I'm driving to go view a home and it takes me 30 minutes to get there, and then you look at the home and then you're 30 minutes to get home, I mean, that's easily in almost an hour and a half right there. So you want to make the best use of your time by filtering homes that you view. They're also going to do the research on the property. We're going to get into that in spades in the coming days. So I won't touch on that too much more. But not only are they going to do the research for you, they're also going to help arrange the process. They're going to provide a list of contacts that you likely don't have. And when it comes to buying a home, I'm going to suggest you don't want to be picking people off of Google or out of the phone book, if that's still a thing. You want to be using professionals to help you with the purchase of one of the most expensive things you're ever going to buy, one of the biggest things you're ever going to have to commit to in your life. You want the best team helping you with that, and they've got the Rolodex of people. For those young people watching, you don't even know what a Rolodex is, but you've got the Rolodex of people with the names and contacts of those that are the best of what they do. So you're going to definitely want to have access to those as well. One of the fun things that a realtor does as well is, other than professionally manage the process and recommend people, is we are insured for the benefit of the public. So what does that mean? Well, people are human, they can make mistakes, of course, right? A realtor's job, among many others that I've described already, is to write an enforceable contract to make sure that you actually get the property that you want to contractually. That's part of our job. And another piece of that, though, is actually being insured for your protection, because if there's an error that's made somewhere along the line, well, you're protected as a consumer because you have something to fall back on to make sure that the wrong can be righted. So, having a licensed real estate professional in the province of British Columbia comes with a ton of benefits, and it's just really positive for the consumer, and it keeps getting better each and every year, which is really great, and something I'm very proud of the industry and where they've come from where they were when I previously started back in 2007. So, and this all these great things that you as a consumer get from working with a real estate professional, um, a realtor has to maintain these things. So it's not something that, if you're working with someone like me who was licensed, nearly 20 years ago, or whatever, time frame is that you're watching this video, it's not just you got this, license and you don't have to maintain it. There is tons of stuff changing all the time. There is legal updates. There's changes in taxes. There's changing in financing. There's changes in the rules. I mean, we live in British Columbia. Regardless of when I know that you're watching this video, there has been a change by the provincial government recently about real estate. There's always so much going on with real estate in our province. So you're always going to want to be on top of that. And a realtor's job is to be on top of that. So every 2 years at minimum, they're having to meet educational requirements to make sure that they can better protect you and make sure that they are doing exactly what they need to be. So the question that you might be left with is, wow, this all sounds great. And why would I not use a realtor? But you've got this little lingering thing over your head that's saying, well, shoot, do I have to pay for this? Where's this coming from? And that's a really great question, and something that doesn't get talked about often enough. The way that the system kind of works as of the day of filming this video, buyers are educated about where the money is coming from to compensate their realtor, but I feel that oftentimes people don't quite understand the whole process of how the money got there in the first place. So the question is, who pays? Who pays for the realtor services? So any home that you're seeing on a website, an MLS-driven website, whether that's realtor.ca or rew.ca or any of the big brokerage websites, anything like that, the question is, well, actually, not the question, rather, those listings got there because they're part of something called the multiple listing service. And a seller has to hire a realtor to get onto there. So they're paying somebody or a company to be a part of that. So that's typically how their realtor is getting paid. But what you'll oftentimes see is a seller offer what's called a cooperating commission to a cooperating brokerage. And what a cooperating commission means is it's almost like an incentive to the realtor to say, look, we are offering compensation to you to encourage you to bring your clients to our property. You see, most buyers, they don't typically pay their realtor directly. And here's the reason, it's pretty easy, is because they're usually trying to use the bulk of their savings, the bulk of their money to put towards the property. And while they need all of the great services that a realtor will provide, and have the protections and all the homework that goes into making sure they discover all the pertinent facts about the property, well, they also want to maximize their purchase price. Typically, they want to put as much money towards the property as they can. So oftentimes the money, well, where would it come from then? It kind of makes sense that it would be baked in to the sale price of the, coming out of the equity of the seller. So This is oftentimes how it works. This is called a cooperating commission. And this is what you're going to see on the MLS for properties that are listed on the MLS or those websites that I had talked about. So there is different fees that are offered out to realtors. There's no standard, but there certainly is common numbers that you will often see. And you'll have to speak with your real estate professional, about where their compensation is coming from and what their expectations are for their compensation. Also, what services that they are going to provide you for the compensation that's expected. But that is typically how most people are going to be compensated or compensating their realtors. But of course, there's other options. You could negotiate with a realtor who's helping you buy about a flat fee, as an example. So, you will compensate them X amount of money to help you, locate and find a house or whatever services that you necessarily agree on with your realtor. It could be a sliding scale based on the purchase price of the property. So it could be a percentage, as an example, of how much is spent on the property, and there's other means as well. But as I said, oftentimes this is paid by the seller. And one of the interesting things about that I think too is, well, the question is, where does the seller get the money from? Most home sellers likely still have a mortgage on their property, meaning they don't own it full out and whatnot. So if you were giving someone $1 million as an example for their property, well, who's giving the seller the $1 million? You are. Right. And if the seller's using portions of the money that you give them to pay the real estate professionals that are involved in the deal, the question really becomes, well, who is actually paying those real estate fees? And it could be arguable that it's you as the buyer. Those real estate fees are really baked into the prices on the MLS, regardless of what those real estate fees are, because to get on the MLS, obviously real estate fees have to be offered out at this time. So that's a little bit about how a realtor gets compensated. Now, there is a couple of ways that you can buy a home as well, where you're maybe not necessarily dealing with a realtor. You could buy a resale property through a realtor, but you could also know somebody in the neighborhood or have a friend or a family member that wants to sell their home. And maybe that's a private transaction that's just really structured together between a lawyer or a notary to kind of tie everything together, and there's no fees involved whatsoever. You could also choose to buy the home directly from a builder. So maybe you're buying a condominium or in a new townhouse complex, or buying a detached home in a new community that's being offered by a builder. You can buy directly from the builder in British Columbia. Now, that's totally fine if that's something that you choose to do, but I will give you a little bit of a caveat. That's probably something that you should not consider doing. There's certainly been some horror stories coming out of not only Ontario, but also British Columbia about people buying directly from the builders and not really understanding exactly what they're getting into. And that is not something that you want to get involved with. Really at the end of the day, a builder or buying directly from somebody, whether it's a builder or private, they have no obligations to you other than to be truthful. They can't lie, but they really don't have any obligations to you outside of that. So they don't have to go above and beyond to discover pertinent facts about a property. They don't have to give you advice. They don't have to tell you pros and cons of things. You do have a responsibility as a buyer in British Columbia to do due diligence. And if you don't know what you're doing, or the people that are helping you don't know what you're doing, you stand to put yourself in a pretty precarious situation. And I am seeing as well with new construction, there's a lot of terms and conditions that are being snuck into these very massive documents that are created by a team of lawyers who work for the developer or the builder, not for you. And they're really detrimental to people like you, people buying the property. So if you're not catching these, you're not trying to negotiate these out, or you're simply just blindly signing them, you're setting yourself up for a lot of problems potentially down the road. So you want to be very, very careful about that when you are doing that. So I think the moral of the story there is, don't go it alone. You definitely want professional help. You could also buy for sale by owner, as I mentioned earlier. Those are people typically that are selling their homes and they don't want to pay for professional assistance or help in that. And that's totally cool. That's fine if that's what they want to do. But, important for you as a buyer, those people are not held to the same standard that a real estate professional is when they list a home for sale. So you're putting yourself again at a little bit of a higher risk. And oftentimes dealing with those people, it can be really quite difficult because not only do they not know what they're doing, but oftentimes they're very unrealistic, especially in terms of their asking prices. So resale certainly is typically the better option. Having a real estate professional on both sides of the transaction obviously I might be a little bit biased on here, but I do truly believe it is going to set you up for better success. And then you've got, the ethics and the codes of conduct and whatnot that comes along with having a real estate professional assist you in this. You might be asking yourself as well, who else is involved in this and what sort of fees might you be looking at? Well, who else is involved? You're going to have people like a mortgage professional or a mortgage broker. You're going to have a lawyer or a notary or a CPA, possibly a home inspector, maybe an appraiser. You're going to have insurance providers. Maybe there's a strata corporation involved, the city or municipality. Maybe your friends or family are important in terms of making your decision, or maybe there's additional trades or contractors that you need because you've discovered certain things about a home that you need to do further investigations on. So we're going to discuss all that in coming days about these types of people that are involved in transaction, and really what you want to consider when you're buying. Now, if you're watching this, maybe you are somewhat at the beginning phases, and sometimes it's helpful to know kind of what the calendar of events might look like as you proceed through the transaction, and just really when you might actually be living in that new property. So what you're seeing right now is just a little bit about kind of the general time frame that is common. It doesn't mean it happens every time, but oftentimes you might be in the getting ready phase, and I mean that phase can last as long as you need it to. To be truthful, buying a home is really quite simple. It's kind of like buying a car. Everybody's got a budget, and would I love to drive a Ferrari? Absolutely, right? I'm sure you would as well. With that being said, though, I don't have the budget or whatnot to afford a Ferrari and to enjoy one. So therefore, I have to buy cars within my budget. And those cars within my budget have certain features. They look certain ways. They offer certain things. They have a certain price point, obviously, and that's what I have to work in within if I want to buy a car. And that's no different than a home. So, you might want certain features in a home, and I really hope you can get them as long as your budget will allow for that in the location that you want to live. So, getting ready sometimes is really about people just wrapping their minds around it and whatnot. But once they're ready, diving in is kind of starting this process that you're seeing right now. And really the search, as I said, it can be relatively quick. It can be as quick as the first house you see, to be honest, if you really know what you're looking for, or it can be, anytime, but, usually it ends up being about 3 weeks. We find people usually see anywhere between 8 to 12 homes until they're, kind of prepared to make a decision. After that 3 weeks, you go into writing an offer. We're going to dive all into details on writing an offer in the coming days, but you will write the offer, and that might go back and forth a little bit with the seller. And ideally, hopefully it doesn't take too long, but might take a few days. But then you're going to go into what's called a condition period. And unless you're writing an offer without conditions, which is something we'll talk about, but for the most of you watching this, you likely are going to be writing conditions on your offer. That process usually can last anywhere between about 7 to 10 days typically. And there's a lot of due diligence that goes into that, something we're going to cover in future days. But this is really where you're going to help protect yourself against making bad decisions about maybe the mortgage you decide, or the home that you buy, or making sure that you're getting all the information to be an informed buyer to make really good decisions for yourself. After those conditions, which takes about that 7 to 10 days, you're now committing fully to that home. So writing an offer oftentimes doesn't mean that you fully committed to a home. It's actually when you remove the conditions that now you've fully committed to that home. And by doing that, you've kind of oftentimes triggered the home seller, hey, you need to go out and you need to go find something to buy now as well. And oftentimes they need time so they don't end up homeless and have nowhere to go. So very commonly they're going to need, maybe about 2 months, give or take. And that's pretty common. So, that really is situation dependent, but you can see here, but by the time you commit and you trigger that waiting to move in and waiting to get into the actual property thing, this process can be almost about 3 months. If you're watching this video today and you wanted to be in a home within 3 months from now, it's time to get started. It's time to get the process rolling. So that's a little bit about just the time frame and whatnot. And before we kind of start wrapping up for today, I want to make sure that you're aware of the costs of buying a home. Obviously, the purchase price is pretty obvious and whatnot, but these are the costs as of today. These are always changing. Taxes are always changing. Rules are always changing, as I mentioned. But this is just a general overview, but certainly not meant to take away from doing your own investigations with your real estate professional or us. If you'd like us to help you buy a home, we'd love to be a part of that. And link in the description below this video where you can certainly, book a time to speak with me and my team. But this is not meant to take away from advice in the moment, particular to your situation and particular to the home you're buying and what's going on at the time. So, but I do want to make sure you're aware of these. So, in British Columbia, we have a tax among many other ones called a property transfer tax, or PTT. Now, property transfer tax, I do encourage you to visit the government website, because this, between the rules of this and the amounts of this and the exemption amounts for this can change rather frequently. But generally speaking, when you're paying property transfer tax on a property, you're paying 1% of the first $200,000 you spend. You're paying 2% on the balance of that, between $200,000 to $2 million. You're paying 3% on the fair market value greater than that $2 million. And you're paying an additional 2% on that money over $3 million. If you're buying a home over $3 million, bless you and good for you. So, and make sure you call us. We like you people just as much as we like everybody else. So, anyways, that's a little bit about how much you would spend on that, and that's certainly something you don't want to get caught by surprise. But the good news is too, if you're someone that's watching this, it's maybe a first-time home buyer, somebody that's looking for a new construction property, there are exemptions to not having to pay that money, because those bills can be pretty big. An example of that is, $1 million property, which is I want to say it's a reasonable amount of money in British Columbia. That's $18,000 in property transfer tax, right? So good news is there is people that can qualify for exemptions. So a first-time home buyer can qualify for an exemption, and there is certain exemptions. You're going to want to check the government website as well. There's things like you have to be a BC resident for at least a year, or you have to have filed at least 2 income taxes. I believe it's in the last 5 years. You have to have never owned property anywhere in the world previously. You have to reside in the property as your principal residence. It has to be smaller than about a half hectare of property, and it has to be worth less than $835,000 as of the date of filming this video. This was updated relatively recently as the time of filming this, but $835,000 is kind of the threshold, and there is a partial exemption up to $860,000 as well. So if you meet those conditions, and only you and your CPA or your tax advisor is going to know if you actually meet those conditions, you can be exempt on paying property transfer tax up to the first $500,000. So that's a nice little savings. Certainly not something to shake a stick at. The other thing I would add to that is qualifying people can also be exempt from paying property transfer tax on new construction in British Columbia. Now, new construction, of course, does have GST, something we're going to cover in a moment. But when it comes to new construction, there is currently a full exemption on paying property transfer tax up to $1.1 million, with a partial exemption up to $1.15 million. So there is some caveats to that as well. So I encourage you to check out the government's website for that as well. But generally speaking, if you're a resident of BC buying new construction, you have a good chance of being exempt from paying the property transfer tax up to $1.1 million, which is awesome. The next one that I want to get into is GST. GST is generally not applicable on the sale of a resale property. GST commonly is applicable on the sale of a new property. It can be applicable on the sale of land, and it can be applicable on what's called a substantially renovated property. So for the purposes of this, just to make it easy, a substantially renovated property, I want you to think like 90% of the property's been renovated. If we're putting this in terms of a house, the drywall's been pulled down, the floor's been pulled down, the walls have been opened up. The house is completely gutted and put back together. That may be an example where that could qualify for that. And that's a little bit of a slippery slope that we're not going to deal with in this video, but it's also not common, so I don't think we need to worry about it too much. And the good news as well, for certain qualifying people, is there is a potential rebate of about 36% of the GST who's paying that for a buyer who purchases the home with the intention of making it their principal residence. But again, there's qualifications in that. So you're gonna have to check the federal government's website to get that and make sure you keep up to date on it. Some other general fees when it comes to buying a home, you've got lawyer fees or notary fees. We oftentimes will only recommend lawyers to our clients for various reasons, something we'll likely jump into in coming days in this video series. And you might want to chat with your certified professional accountant about the purchase as well, about any tax implications, that sort of thing. You're going to likely want to do a home inspection. There's times where that is more valuable than others, but that all costs money. So you're going to want to find a really reputable home inspector. Believe me, folks, you get what you pay for with home inspections. So you're going to want to find somebody who's really great to help you inspect the property and understand what you're looking for. Something, again, we'll talk about in the coming days. You're going to want to budget for moving expenses, of course, unless you're planning on throwing it all back and all your stuff in the back of a pickup truck, which you can certainly do as well. But you're going to want to prepare for those. There is also adjustments, typically when a property sells. So an easy example is people pay property tax in the month of July for their properties based on the entire year. And if somebody was to have not paid that property tax yet, because you're not buying in July, you're buying before that, maybe in May, well, that property tax for the time that they own the property between January and May, you don't deserve to pay that. They should. So that's what the example of an adjustment would be. And that happens with things like taxes and utilities. They're a little bit more minor than some of the things we're talking about here. And then the other one is just really other taxes. There is constantly being new taxes introduced. As of lately, there is a federal flipping tax, there is a provincial flipping tax, there's foreign buyers taxes, there is taxes that could be implemented like GST if the home was used for commercial use prior to you buying it. Like there's speculation and vacancy taxes. There's just tons of stuff, tons of landmines, and hence going back to why you want that professional advice when you're going in and trying to buy a home. So that really, you guys, is going to wrap up day one of this video series. But I really encourage you to go check out video number two. And here's some of the reasons why. In day two, we're going to cover some things about how to actually choose and pick a real estate professional. And I love this line on here because your friend or your sister-in-law just might not cut it, if that's what you're thinking. Okay, so we're going to dive into that a little bit coming up, where I'm going to tell you a very real truth about the real estate industry, something that you're not going to want to miss. I'm going to share with you some massive failures that buyers make every single day when they're buying homes, and ones that I want you to avoid because you're educating yourself and you're watching this video. And I am going to share with you things that you think that you know, but you probably don't. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you over there. And in fact, you're going to see a sneak peek of that coming up next, but I will see you over there, or you can just click the link of the video coming up, or that you're going to see right now. But either way, you're not going to want to miss day two. It's packed. All right. We'll see you over on the next video. Cheers. You see, most people think that all real estate professionals are the same, but this couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is, real estate professionals come with varying level of skills. They come with varying levels of experience, and they come with all sorts of different types of advice for particular situations. Ones that might help you be wildly successful, but ones that might not help you do anything close to what you originally set out to do.